Hello to everyone and welcome to a new Energy Capital interview. Today, I'm very happy to talk with Rob Gramlich, Executive Director of Americans for a Clean Energy Grid and President of Grid Strategies, LLC. In this brief interview, Rob will share with us his take on the relevance of having modern and regionally connected transmission lines to provide customers with reliant and cost-effective electricity solutions. Rob, thanks so much for being with us today. How are you?
Sure thing, Anna. I'm doing great. Thanks. It's good to be here.
Thank you very much, Rob. So I'll start with our first question. From your perspective, what's the influence of the state of regional transmission lines in the recent Texas outage due to the winter storm?
Yes, well, that's been one of many issues that people have identified as relevant in the very unfortunate Texas outages. Texas is a separate grid, separate from the eastern and the western grids in the continental U.S. And whereas we saw in the upper Midwest, the grid operator there called MISO was importing 13 gigawatts of power. Of course, Texas, being separated, was able to import less than 1 gigawatt. And that's a factor that we've seen in many reliability incidents around the country. When there's severe weather, what tends to happen is there's available supply in one region that can be used to help out the region in the center of the weather event. And that's only possible, of course, if you have regionally connected interregional transmission capacity.
So in this regard, what's the importance of having modern and regionally connected electric transmission lines in terms of national security, for instance?
Yes, well, so there are a lot of benefits to interregionally connected lines. One of them is certainly for clean energy development, because there's a lot of remote, very low-cost renewable energy around, and it helps for a reliable power system to have that very broadly distributed across many states. But reliability is an entirely, separate but related benefit. As I said before, there are great benefits for any given region when a severe weather event or just high load or scarcity conditions hit one area. There's usually available supply in the neighboring area, and sometimes that even, a weather pattern will move from one region to the next, and the power will be flowing in droves over to one region, and then the weather pattern moves and it flows back the other direction. So that's really why we need to make sure we build up these interregional transmission connections. And it also says a little bit about who benefits. I think the answer is that consumers, electric load in both regions benefit from that transmission. And even on an hour-to-hour or day-to-day basis, that changes back and forth. So really, everybody should be sharing in the funding of these lines, and we need to develop regulatory processes to take that into account.
In what ways could an outdated grid affect American customers?
Yeah, there are a number of ways consumers benefit, I think, from updating, modernizing, and expanding our grid. What tends to happen is planners will look at them each in separate buckets. Reliability is one bucket, economic transmission congestion reduction as another bucket, resilience as another, public policy as a fourth. And the problem is when you consider all of these separately, sometimes the value of transmission doesn't show up as an overall benefit. But what we need to do is recognize that all of these categories are important, and we should put them all together and do what we call in our Americans for a Clean Energy Grid research and papers, multi-benefit planning. So let's put all the benefits together, consider them together, and then develop the lines that achieve all of those benefits.
So, considering the climate change and global warming emergencies, what do you think could be done to prepare grids in the face of natural disasters?
Yes, hardening our transmission system is important, just like our generation and our distribution systems. There are some different types of investments, different conductors, towers, etc., other assets that can be very beneficial for hardening these lines, and just having multiple pathways. The way the transmission network works is if one line goes down, we have a little literal network where power can flow and be rerouted around other areas in order to serve load and make sure there's no loss of service.
So finally, Rob, from your work at Americans for a Clean Energy Grid, what policies could the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission implement in the regional and interregional plans to reduce customer electricity bills and also modernize the grid?
Yeah, Americans for a Clean Energy Grid released that report. Planning for the Future was the title. So the first step is to make sure that plans incorporate what we know about the future. For example, all of these utilities around the country have decarbonization goals or clean energy goals, and yet currently most transmission planning doesn't even include those. So that's an obvious one. Let's plan for the future about what we know about utility goals. Also, state policies. Many states have clean energy policies. Those should be accounted for. Also, a number of states are pursuing electrification of transportation and building heating. That adds to load. That should be accounted for. So the first thing is to make sure we're planning for the future. FERC has a big role in that. FERC has authority over transmission planning. In short, there's the complicated, longer description of that in our paper and exactly what they can do and what they can't do. But these things FERC can do. And then also FERC can require that planners do multi-benefit planning that takes into account all of the benefits of transmission. And there's a number of other planning reforms that we suggest in that paper. And again, FERC has the jurisdiction. It's the federal entity that oversees these issues. It's their responsibility to take care of. We've seen a number of statements from FERC commissioners that they're interested in looking at this problem. So we're hopeful that they will take this up.
Well, Rob, thank you very much for sharing this information and insights with us. I don't know, do you want to share your final take in this?
Well, thanks, Anna. There's going to be a lot of work for a lot of people, both at the regional level, state level, and the federal level. So I hope all of your listeners look for ways to get involved.